All right, guys. This is our first video lesson for Algebra 1. If it goes well, great. If it goes poorly, we'll kind of reevaluate. I'm going to try to take it real slow with you guys. We're not going to do too much. But I do want to start on page 628. And we're going to start with example 1, okay, which has a radical 80. Okay, and the instructions here is to simplify. So we're not going to use our calculators. We're going to use a method to reduce our answer without using the calculator. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to look for perfect squares. And a reminder, the perfect squares are 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, 81. There's a ton of these, right? These literally go on infinitely. But the reason that these are the perfect squares is because if you notice, 4 is 2 squared. 9 is 3 squared. 16 is equal to 4 squared. 25 is 5 squared. And that list goes on as well. So these numbers on the right are the perfect squares, not these. These are the perfect squares. And we're going to look back at our radical 80 over here. We're going to see which number is divisible, right, can be divided by the largest perfect square. So let's just start backwards and work our way to the top of the list. 80 divided by 64 is a decimal. 80 divided by 49, decimal. 80 divided by 36 is a decimal. 80, and if you can't do these in your head, just use your calculator here. 80 divided by 25 is a decimal. But if you find 80 that can be divided by 16, it's actually 5. So I'm going to rewrite radical 80 as radical 16 times 5. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the radical symbol, this square root symbol, right, is the radical, right? And I'm going to write it so each number has a radical. Right, so I have radical 16 times radical 5. Now the good news is we all know what radical 16 is. Square root of 16 is 4. And it's timesing that radical 5 down here. So this is our answer. It is the simplified version of radical 80. That's the simplified version of radical 80. All right, so let's try, that was example 1. Let's try guided practice. I'm going to do 1A. This looks like it's square root of 54. Okay. And again, we're going to start by looking at our perfect square list and seeing which one is divisible. So we'll start 54 divided by 49, decimal. 54 divided by 36 is a decimal. 54 divided by 25, decimal. Divided by 16, decimal. But 9 goes into 54. 54 divided by 9 is 6. So I have square root of 9 times 6. And just like we did up here, each of these numbers will get their own radical. Each of those numbers will get their own radical. So I will write it like this. Square root of 9 times the square root of 6. And we know that the square root of 9 is 3. Right? We know it's 3. So we bring our radical 6 down, and our answer is 3 radical 6. This is that's the reduced version, right? Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to go over to page 629. Okay, I want to go over to page 629. I want to do not the example 2. We're going to do guided practice 2A. Okay, so you can see here that I have 2 radicals that are timesing each other, and they tell us to simplify. Okay, so the good news is we've already kind of done this a little bit. If you notice, look, so we have radical times radical. Look at our top problem. We did that already, right? We times them. Okay, and if we work backwards, we're just going to times the inside numbers, right? 16 times 5 gave us 80, right? If we work backwards, so what is 5 times 10? It's 50. So radical 5 times radical 10 is radical 50. Now, our job is to see if we can simplify radical 50. So let's look at our list. 50 divided by 49 decimal divided by 36 decimal. There it is. 50 divided by 25 is 2. So I got 25 times 2 in here. What is this? So we have two numbers inside. We will give them, just like we did up here, right? Two numbers. Radical, radical. They each get their own symbol. So we got radical 25 times radical 2. What is the square root of 25? Everybody knows that. It is 5. So we have 5 radical 2. So radical 5 times radical 10 gave us radical 50. And we simplified that to 5 square root of 2. All right, I want to look at 2b as well. This is example 2, 2b, guided practice here. Looks like it's a square root of 6 times the square root of 8. Right? So again, we will times the insides, right, like we did there and there. 6 times 8 gives me 48. So the square root of 48. Now, we want to find that perfect square that goes into 48. So 48 divided by 36 is a decimal. Divided by 25 is a decimal. There it is, 16. Reminder, if you can't divide these in your head like I can, just use your calculator to divide. Right? Use your calculator. So square root of 48 is 16 times 3. When we have two numbers under the radical like we did up here, we will give them their own radical. So that's square root of 16 times the square root of 3. And we know what the square root of 16 is. What is the square root of 16? It is 4. And our radical 3's got to go with it. So we're going to say square root of 3 times 4 here. 4 times radical 3. That was this thing, right? Radical 6 times radical 8 gave us the radical 48, which we simplified to 4 radical 3. Okay, folks. What we're going to do now is I have a couple of problems you can't find in your book, but we are going to go ahead and try those. Right, we're going to go ahead and try those. So again, we're going to try 3 of them here. I'll call this first one 1, and it's going to be 3 radical 3 times 4 radical 5. All right. Now you can see that we have numbers on the inside and we have numbers on the outside. Very easy. Okay, what we will do is we will times the inside numbers by the inside numbers, and we'll times the outside numbers by the outside numbers. So 3 times 4 is 12. The inside numbers, we will times them just like we did in problem 2. What is 3 times 5? It is radical 15. Now the last step of this is we want to check radical 15 to see if we can simplify it. So let's go ahead and look at our perfect squares. 15 divided by 9 is a decimal. 15 divided by 4 is a decimal. All right, so it looks like this problem is simplified. Right, this problem is simplified. This is the answer. 3 radical 3 times 4 radical 5 gave me 12 radical 15. All right, let's try another one here. All right, and this one is going to be problem 2. We'll say 2 radical 6 times 3 radical 6. Again, what we're going to do is times inside by inside and outside by outside. So 2 times 3 gives me 6. And the inside, 6 times 6 is, 36. Now this problem's a little funny, okay? Because we know what the square root of 36 is. What is the square root of 36? It's 6, right? So remember, these are timesing, right? So this 6 comes down. The square, these are timesing. So what is 6 times 6? It's 36. Okay. So this one's a little weird because the radical symbol disappears, and that sometimes happens. Okay. So if it disappears on you, don't panic. Right. That does happen sometimes. 2 radical 6 times the 3 radical 6 gave us 36. All right. Last problem I want to look at is, let's see, 2 radical 3 times 3 radical 6. And once again, we will times inside by inside and outside by outside. So 2 times 3 is 6. And 3, the inside's 3 times 6 is 18. Now, last step, we have to check that 18, right, to see if there's a perfect square that goes in there. So let's look. 18 divided by 16 is a decimal. 18 divided by 9 is 2. All right, so I'm going to break this problem into 6 times radical 9 times 2. And just like we've been doing all day, we're going to give each of these their own radical symbol, which is 6, radical 9, radical 2. Okay? Now, a reminder that all three of these things are timesing each other, right? They're all timesing. Okay, so we know that the square root of 9 it's 3, right? And this is what we're left with, right? The radical 2 comes down, there's the 6. All right, so what is 6 times 3? It is 18, right? So I got 18. I got to bring that radical 2 over here, and that's our answer. Okay, so 2 radical 3 times 3 radical 6 simplifies to 18 square root of 2. All right, so that's the lesson for today. This is lesson 1. I have a couple of homework problems, and I will post them there as well. But here it is. I want you guys to get on page 631, okay? And I want you to do numbers 1, 4, 19, and 25. I want to be very clear with you. Guys, these are not due. I'm not interested in these at the moment. These are just for you to practice, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end this video, and then I will post the answers to 1, 4, 19, and 25 in this video. Okay, if you have questions, email me or comment on the video. Good luck.